Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is Ciara from Ciara T Designs, and today I have my week 3 12 weeks of Christmas card to share with you. So let's jump right in. So we're going to create the background first. I have a piece of distressed watercolor cardstock here, and I put the sticky mat in my Misti. I kind of thought I was going to use this, but I haven't quite figured out a way to use it well with embossing powder, just because I'm always concerned that I'm going to get embossing powder all over it. So I kind of did half of this background in my Misti and then half of it with stamping blocks once I got to the smaller snowflakes. But I did kind of do a mixture of both there. And I'm going to white heat emboss these snowflakes onto my background. So I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool and my Versamark ink. And then the stamps, all of the snowflakes for this, except the one we do at the very end that ends up the focal, are from the Says Stamp Snowflake Season stamp set. This came out, I think, like last year. I love this stamp set. I think it's stunning. So I'm pretty excited about it. But I keep using it. I love snowflakes. I kind of gravitate towards certain things, and then I want to collect all the things that are of that thing. So snowflakes, butterflies, that kind of stuff. I really love those things. So I do tend towards them. So you saw me pour on the white embossing powder, and then I'm going to kind of fill out the background. I know that you can't see it here. I mean, in the video, I can't see it here, but when I'm actually making this background, I can see where I have snowflakes. They aren't smooth and melted yet, so you can still see the texture before the embossing powder gets melted. So I can tell what areas have some and what don't. So I'm kind of just filling in the areas, and I'm making sure to stamp off of the edges because that gives more interest to the background. Now we are going to create a flat shaker card. I think they're also called infinity shaker cards. And so the background is not super important. If you missed an area, or your stamp or your snowflake didn't stamp down properly or anything like that, it's really not going to matter because it's not the first thing the eye is going to see. It's just, the carrying of the big snowflake that's going to go on the front at the end. But you don't need to worry about how perfectly the background's filled in or anything like that. This is just a fun step because I love snowflakes and I have a few stamp sets of them that I like to use. But this is really just me having fun creating kind of my own snowflake pattern paper. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing here. And I just put the embossing powder over everything, and then once we're done making the background, I'll melt it all together, which is what we're going to do here. So again, this isn't going to look like much for you guys, sadly. I can see it in person, obviously. So you're going to see me tip it to make sure that all of the areas that were not shiny are shiny now, because once the embossing powder melts, of course, the areas get shiny and look really pretty. So you'll see me tip it a few times in the light to kind of make sure that I've got every area of every snowflake embossed, and then that kind of lets me know that I've hit the background well enough. And I did have to bring my heat gunning back in actually because I missed a spot. So there's just so many elements on this background that I'm heat embossing, so I kind of had to be careful not to miss them, or I wouldn't be able to keep that powder there once I added the moisture that we're going to add in the next step, which is right here. So I did mist it with some water, and then I'm going to spray it with 3 of the Distress Mica stain sprays that came out. These are from the Christmas sets that just came out here. I think it was like 2 weeks ago, I think. So I have 3 colors. I have Cocktail Party, which was that kind of pink color, Winter Frost, which is the blue, and then Shiny Bauble, which is kind of that tealy green color. And I used just the 3, and I kind of splattered on some specks as well. This was just, if you guys have been following my series so far this year, I tend towards non-traditional colors for Christmas as a general rule. I'm not a big fan of red, and I like green, but because I'm using it with like pink, it doesn't really end up coming across as Christmas. So I tend towards more non-traditional Christmas colors. So for this one, I kind of went like a bright pink and then a really nice blue and a really nice green. So, I mean, you could literally have done this with any color. It would have really been your preference. You could have done this in a more traditional color palette if you wanted to. Not red and green necessarily because they make brown, and in sprays you have to be really careful with that. But you could have, gone in shades of red, and that would have created a really cool background as well. Or shades of blue, just blue. and that would have been really pretty as well. So that kind of gives you options as to what would be your like kind of preference. But I did splash on a little bit of clean clear water and then kind of just dabbed it off to bring up some of the color, just creating more interest in the background. And then I'm going to bring in my paper towel and just buff off any of the areas that the color is still sitting on top of the snowflakes. That just gives it that white embossing powder to shine through a little bit easier. And then here I'm going to hold it up in the light so you can see all that mica beauty in the background there. Isn't that pretty? And again, we are going to cover this, so it's not as big of a deal, but I still think it turned out really pretty. And then we are going to trim it down. I wanted to add a small mat to it. And originally I thought I was going to use this piece of peacock cardstock, which is what you see sitting there. That's that kind of tealy color. I don't end up using that. I changed my mind last minute. You'll see here because I'll trim that piece down as well. But I kind of aimed to trim it down to be about 1/8. Well, this is about 1/4 of an inch smaller, and then this is about 1/8 of an inch smaller of my A2 base. You guys know that as a general rule, I don't always measure things. I kind of eyeball a lot of stuff. So I know that makes it a little bit difficult, but all I wanted was a small border. And originally this was what I was thinking I was going to use. However, I decided that I didn't like how the teal looked with the colors I had on there. It was just a bit too dark of a teal, and the teal I kind of have in here is a lighter teal, so I kind of pivoted to a different direction there. But I like to make my cards out of stamp packaging. So this is actually from like a Tim Holtz stamp set, I think this one came from. So I just, trimmed it. I marked it against my cardstock first and gave it little cut lines so I knew where I wanted to trim. And then I used my trimmer to make sure that they were straight, because nothing's more irritating than trying to adhere something down and having it be super uneven, so you struggle to get even areas to stick, because you have to think that we're going to fill this with glitter. So if you're not adhering it properly, the glitter is going to seep out. So you have to be a little aware of that and just kind of watch how you cut it down. I like to use double-sided adhesive. This is a Scor-tape. That's my preferred. This is, I believe, the 1/8 of an inch. I like the really small one just because I can nestle it up really close to the edge, and then I don't have to worry about it catching on other things when I go to actually adhere it down to the base. So this is just kind of my preference. And I do like to use my tweezers to remove the backing. I just find that easier for me. So that's kind of what I tend to do. And I like to do one side at a time. The reason I do this is because you have to think that the corners are going to overlap. Now, I have seen some people trim the corners on an angle beforehand. You can absolutely do that if you're confident in it. I don't, because I did that once and I trimmed it a little too close and glitter fell out. So I don't do that. I like to adhere all of my sides. As you're going to see here, I'm going to do 3 sides, and then I do my last layer of Scor-tape on the top, and then I put stuff inside, right? But here you can see I just lift the little bit that's overlapping and trim that off. Again, be careful, because if you cut too much of the plastic, your glitter won't stay in the pocket. But otherwise, it's not a really big hindrance to just trim it off really quickly. So to fill the shaker card, I'm going to use Distress Mica Flakes and Distress Rock Candy Glitter. The reason I gravitate towards these, other than they're beautiful and really since we're going for a snowy card, they're perfect, is because they don't have any static in them. So I find that it's way easier to get them to kind of move around and not just stick to the acetate or the stamp packaging or the background. So you actually get them to shake rather than having it just kind of stick to things and not go anywhere. So that's my preference to these. These are my favorite sets of glitter. I use them all the time. I've seen Tim Holtz actually dye his glitter. I really should try that, and his mica flakes actually. I haven't tried it because I like the clear. I tend towards more neutral colors in my glitter so I can have super vibrant other colors like my backgrounds. But I think that they're really pretty. So then here we've created that whole shaker. You saw me adhere down the top so that I sealed it in, and then I used the scissors to cut off the excess on the 2 corners. And then I like to adhere it down with Scor-tape. I find this just to be the most secure way, and I like to kind of make sure that it's overlapping the sides so that I don't have to worry about anything trying to lift up the plastic on the edge. But for the life of me, I cannot stick this thicker Scor-tape down straight. I cannot do it. Doesn't matter how hard I try, it is always on an angle. I'm going to show you how I fix that though, because it's not a big deal. Again, be careful cutting this off. You don't cut into the plastic. But you can see there that I left a little edge hanging off. Not a big deal. It's super easy once you remove the backing to just fold it in on itself, and then it just sits there. So I can't get it straight to save my life. It is what it is. I just trim it and then fold it over to be what I need it to be, because that's just my my issue with Scor-tape. I just cannot get it straight. And then I brought in, so here's a white piece of glitter cardstock. This is probably one of my favorite glittered cardstocks. I think it's Crafter's Companion. I'm not even sure. I bought it last year and I'm still using it. But I adhered it down to this scrap piece that I had, and then I trimmed all the edges off to be what I actually wanted it to be. This is what I'm going to mat with. But because I struggled to get Scor-tape to lay down straight the first time, I figured it was just easier to do this, was to just kind of adhere it down and then come in and just trim off the sides until I had it straight, because it was a scrap, so the edges weren't straight. And then that kind of gave me the ability to trim it down to what I needed it to be. And then I brought in another piece of that same glitter cardstock, and I'm going to run it through my switch with the Tim Holtz Snowflake 3D Impresslit. I don't think you can get this anymore. It took me a second to remember how to put a 3D Impresslit through my machine. I know that Tim Holtz said that the Impresslits were going to be discontinued. So it may be that you can still find these in certain stores. And if I can, I'll absolutely have it linked down below if you're interested. But I do know that he said that they were discontinuing them. So I don't know if you can find this one or not. This one's been out for quite a while. So, I honestly, I don't know. Any snowflake would do though. If you had a die cut snowflake, like any snowflake would work for this. It's just that I love the dimension of the Impresslit because it gives you such a great raised area as well with a whole bunch of texture. So that's kind of why I gravitated toward this specific one, but any snowflake would work here. And then I put a 3D foam square, a thin 3D foam square in the center of the small snowflake, and I'm going to put it on top of the larger snowflake. And then I'm going to curl up the edges so that kind of gives it even more dimension. Now this card, I don't think I would mail it, to be honest with you, because I am going to add a gem here in a second. And it's just, it added a lot of bulk, and I'm scared that it would not go through the mail well. So this is probably a card I would hand deliver to somebody, or included in like a gift of some kind. But it did work out really well. I think that this turned out really pretty. This was a Nouveau Pure Sheen gem, I think. I don't think they make those anymore either. I've had those in my stash forever. It's just, they're huge. They're like really big gems. So for stuff like this, where it's the only gem, I think it's really great. Whereas if I'm trying to add a bunch of interest in, I don't usually gravitate toward the largest, I go to the small ones. So here, this is my supervisor number 2. This is my kitten. Her name is Ember. She likes to supervise. So she's gonna make sure that I stamp on the inside well here. So I stole a sentiment from the Tim Holtz Cozy Christmas stamp set that says, "Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow." And then I also brought those snowflakes back in to kind of decorate around the inside of the card. So I used Tumbled Glass and picket fence and picked raspberry for the couple of snowflakes. I grabbed mostly just the small snowflakes out of that same set and just kind of put them around the sentiment. As usual, I stuck with an uneven number. That's kind of my preferred method. So here I have 3. I was going to stop here, and then I decided I had to add 2 more just for a little bit more interest on the inside. And I don't show it here because I actually did it afterwards, but I'm going to adhere a thin strip of the cardstock that I cut off of the background inside the card as well, just for a little added interest, because I had them sitting on my desk after I'd trimmed it. So I kind of thought that would look really neat. And I did use Barely Art glue for everything in this that was being adhered. You have to be a bit careful. I had to add a fair amount of glue. Not that I'm a little heavy-handed generally, but because I'm adhering something that's very textured to acetate almost, or plastic, you do have to kind of, like, I had to hold it there for a second. So you're gonna see I'm gonna put my hand on it, and then I made sure it was where I wanted it to be, and then I kind of just stuck my hand on it for a second. I mean, this video sped up. Obviously it looks like I only hold my hand there for like 3 seconds, but it was longer than that. I just be aware, right? And that same thing with that gem. You're adding it onto a glitter cardstock that's been textured. So be aware that it might not adhere as quickly as you're hoping. So just don't knock it off. Well, I mean, if you knock it off, just put a new one on, but you know what I mean? Like, just be aware so that you're less likely to knock it off. And then I did adhere this down to my card base. And now I'm going to show you this card up close and personal. You can see it here. I think it turned out really pretty. I'd love to know what you guys think. I love infinity shaker cards or flat shaker cards, however you want to call it. I think they turned out really pretty. I really enjoy making them. And here you can hear it a little bit here. I'll give you a little sample of that's the shake inside of my little card. I think that it turned out really pretty. So I'd love to know what you guys think. I'd love if you'd leave me a comment, leave me a like, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I do new videos every Monday and Thursday. And every Monday until Christmas will be the 12 Weeks of Christmas series. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you again very soon. Bye-bye for now.